Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Well, hello, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wanup. How you been? Have you been enjoying the film study? I hope so. It looks like you have. I hope that you're checking out the video that goes along with all of the past film study podcasts that I have spent countless hours editing and putting together with all the film clips that we speak about on the film study each year. It was a wonderful project that I gave myself, and so glad that the people who contributed with me and palled with me seemed to like. So I hope that you're following along with your picture pages on that on YouTube. The last 3 episodes, if you haven't caught them, were all with Adam Rao, production designer. We did 1965, 75, and 85. Some really tremendous work in those years. And as we went through those years, what was in fashion and of what was popular in design, and then capsulated in design, and like things like shampoo where you just capsulize like the 70s, or the grandness of like 1985 with Out of Africa and Brazil, and some real gems in there. So take a look at that, or listen to those if you haven't. If you're not into those, okay, you don't want to learn. Cool. You're just here for the interviews. I have plenty. I have so many interviews coming up. I don't know what to do with myself. I actually think I have to quit my set decorator job to be a host of Decorating Pages, because I have been lucky enough to score some pretty amazing interviews coming up for this Emmy season. So hold on tight. Today is a great one too, with production designer Helen Jarvis. Oh, man, what a phenomenal project. I mean, this massive undertaking of Shōgun is just unbelievable. When she starts to tell you about how much ground they covered in just the design and the amount of sets and fields and like football fields worth of like sets, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So hold on tight for that. That's coming up with Helen. She was great too. Really great to connect with her. And so it's been about a month, and I've been working. I am set decorating a show called A Classic Spy, which will be on Netflix. I'm hearing November, I hope. It's a sweet little show, and it's starring Ted Danson, and it is by creator Mike Schur and produced by Morgan Sackett, and it's designed by Ian Phillips. And as I've said before, it's like going home, because it's the Parks and Rec and Good Place group that I've been with many times. And it's been just so rewarding to work with such special people and feel good every day going to work. And these group of actors too, I feel, and just this subject matter that the show is kind of like tugs at your heartstrings, and it's funny too. So it's I'm proud of this little show. At first I was like, oh, uh, what is this? And then you start to see these characters develop, and I really like it. I was sentimental about it, but it's ending. We're on our last block, and I'm so sad for this little band to break up again, because you never know. You never know if this is the last time I walk into those offices at Universal. You never know. So I am absolutely thankful to have been working, because I know it's still slow out there. I know that it's not back to full speed by any means in this business. I know that the unions in IATSE are making their independent deals, and I don't think 44 has settled yet, which I hope that's a good thing. I'm proud of that. I'm glad nobody, you know, I'm glad it wasn't a 2 day sort of rollover. I'm glad we're standing ground. At least I hope we are in whatever we're fighting for there. Um, Good. I'm glad about that. And I hope all the other unions are standing their ground too, because I think it's time. And I think we all mean business. I hope. And no one wants to strike, but we have the power to do that. And I think that the actors and the writers showed that that is meaningful to their cause. And there are many ripples of repercussion from that affects creative, I must say. Many ripples that come down and hit me in my department. So it's not all great, that this, those strikes happen in some sense. You have to understand that it's cause and effect, and the money has to come from somewhere. And obviously, it comes out of other budgets, or it comes out of the show, or it comes, or less shows are made. Like that's it. That's I mean, that's the reality of it. So, but hoping we're all getting what we want there. Since it's been about a month since I last spoke to you, I have taken on myself just really watching. I think I've said this before. I'm really watching almost every Oscar nominated film I can, because I really got myself into this film study. Obviously, I enjoy it. And I really got into the psyche of what was popular in these years, and the design and the capability of the design of those years. And I'm finding it so interesting, and so many films that I've never seen. So I watched this film, Gaslight, which won Best Production Design Black and White 1944 by Cedric Gibbons, who is a god in our world. Um, Set decorator Edwin Willis, and it's Ingrid Bergman, who is so gorgeous. Oh my goodness! And Angela Lansbury is 17 years old in this. Um, and they're basically in this. She's kept hostage, like in this house, Ingrid Bergman, and the dressing is so dense in some rooms, and this sense of claustrophobic, even in like the drapery being so heavy, and these like literally like gaslight fixtures all through the house and everything. It's a real gem of set dressing and production design if you haven't seen Gaslight from 1944. Um, Another one I watched that I thought was a little there's all these little films that you're like, "Oh, look, it's set in Los Angeles." This film called Autumn Leaves, which I don't think was nominated actually, but I think I watched this. Maybe it was. Joan Crawford and Cliff Robertson. If anybody's looking for like 1940s reference of Los Angeles, she lives in this little bungalow, probably off of like Alvarado or something. um, it's a weirdo story of her being an older woman falling in love with a younger man, and then he turns out to be a little bit psycho, which is a reverse. Usually she plays the psycho. Cliff Roberts was so young and so handsome. He was almost like unrecognizable. But yeah, Autumn Leaves. That's a good reference. Anyone looking for that design. And then sticking in like the 40s, 40s, I think maybe 30s, Mus Monsieur Spade, which is on AMC. This is a new show. Spade referencing from the Maltese Falcon, um, that character. And it's Clive Owen, who I love, who was in Impeachment, who I got to see a lot of as Bill Clinton, but even out of his Bill Clinton makeup was a hottie. Um, and he plays a detective, and I only got to see the first episode so far. It's really good. It's set in France in the 40s. It's a good little mystery. if anybody's looking for that. Monsieur Spade on AMC. It might be on AMC Plus. Um, I've been watching The Regime on HBO, and I want to like it so badly, and I want to be in on this joke. And I think the costumes are amazing. I do think the sets are really well, like this huge mansion that she lives in, and this palace or whatever. I mean, it's incredible. Um, but I think I'm giving up. I think I did like 5 episodes, four and a half, and I think I'm giving up. It's just not enough for me. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why she has a lisp. I don't know what that choice was. I love Kate Winslet, but I don't get it. So I think I'm done with that. I don't know. And if anyone disagrees with me, if anyone has seen more, and if you can tell me to stick with it, please do. But I don't see it. I don't get it. So I don't know. Um, Two more gems that I had never seen. Auntie Mame, 1958. Now, this set is unbelievable. I believe the production designer is Malcolm Burt and the set decorator is George Hopkins. She lives in like this penthouse in New York City. They changed the style of this penthouse 11 times. It's amazing. Like one's Asian, one's like modern, one's classic, one's nouveau riche. Like it's amazing. The lighting fixtures, the color schemes, it's fantastic. I never knew this movie existed. Like I knew like Auntie Meme, like I heard about it, but I never knew that this set existed in it. The costumes were fantastic. By I wrote it down like Ori Kelly, who did American in Paris and Some Like It Hot. The costumes are fantastic. I just wish I could live like Auntie Mame. Just redecorate my apartment 11 times over like 10 years or something, I think it is. Really fantastic. 1958. Really great design there. Huge set too. The other one is Gigi. I had never seen that. Cecil Beaton and Kyo Gleason is the decorator. And Henry W. Grace also, I think, is the decorator. Really bold colors in this, like this red room and this, like I don't know, the costumes against the the colors of the sets are just phenomenal. Weirdo story again, like the girl falls in love with a guy who was like kind of like her older brother. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, and it's the girl from Daddy Longlegs who was in that movie. If you haven't seen that, Fred Astaire 1955, we did that in the film study. That Daddy Longlegs, that's a gem for sets and cinematography. Oh, just fantastic. So that's what I've been watching. I basically just try to watch old movies now. I've turned into that person. I just watch old movies now. I've kind of given up on Housewives. I know, I know. I'm just going through a phase. I'm just pausing on Housewives right now. Let's just say. Um, but in my commute, that I just keep rolling through these books. But I cannot stress enough the book Scorsese and God, I didn't write down the author, but it's called Scorsese. It came out in 2022. I know that. Um, and he talks about how he got into film. It's kind of like a oral history. All these people talking about his films. They talk about Raging Bull. They talk a lot about Temptation of Christ. They talk about his parents so much. Mean Streets, After Hours, the early Scorsese. It only goes up till it doesn't cover Casino. It does cover Goodfellas though, which was great. It's a fantastic book about filmmaking, and I learned a little bit in the end chapters about his film foundation, about restoring film foundations. And then I looked it up and I never knew that I could go over to UCLA and for free watch some restored films. So if anybody's looking to watch some restored films, you could go over to it's film feudal-foundation.org and slash upcoming dash screenings. And you can see they're all over the country, really, but in LA, they're at UCLA. I thought that was fantastic. And then I read the book by Sidney Lumet, who did 12 Angry Men, The Wiz, The Verdict, um, Power. I mean, he's done so many films, and I love The Morning After. Um, and it's called Making Movies. And I think anyone who wants to get into movies should read this book or listen to this book. And the guy who narrates it on Audible does a fantastic job of like an old man voice, like a crotchety old director voice. I was really into it. But he literally goes through his day. I wake up. My driver is there. I have my bagel. I go to I have this when I arrive to set, they put the call sheet in my hand. Like da 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 his whole day and what everyone does on the set. Maybe everyone. Yeah, he didn't really cover me, but it's a really great breakdown of set life and making a film. Talks about editing. He's talking about cinematography and production design and the importance of all of these crafts and how he could not do his job without them. It's a really great. I believe it was published in 92 or 93. Um, the best part is the last chapter when he tries to predict the future of like it's all about the pictures. Like him and Scorsese, it's pictures. Like it's never movies or films. It's always pictures, which I would love to be able to change my lingo and just say pictures, but I think I'm too far gone. But in the pictures, we do this, or it's all about the pictures. So, but he just has this thinks he has like a crystal ball of like the future of TV and film, and it's pretty funny. That's all I'm gonna say. Uh, but I really enjoyed it. So Scorsese and Sidney Lumet making movies. Really two good films that I list films pictures. Two good books that I listened to on Audible. Yeah, I really like them. I'm going to give you a little heads up of some interviews coming up. I have a lot booked, but just to let you know of some that are definitely coming up because they're already taped. Gina Alessi is next week. She is a graphic designer for the Apple show Manhunt about the Abraham Lincoln assassination. And what is also interesting about Gina is that she has an online course for anyone who wants to be a graphic designer. So that is next week's episode. Coming up, I have production designer Sam Elliott from All the Light We Cannot See on Netflix, David Grotman from Ripley. I have set decorator Kim Leonard from Griselda. I have about 10 others that I can get into. It's busy. I mean, Emmy season FYC is in full swing, people. Kirsten Mann, from the costume designer of Loot, one of my friends. I can't wait. So yeah. But on this episode, let's not forget this episode because it's awesome. I speak with production designer Helen Jarvis about the amazing limited series Shōgun. This series is a massive undertaking with intense research, diving into historical texts, paintings, and archival material. She discusses that the goal is not to just recreate 17th century Japan in the Shayan Zurkyu style, but also make it visually compelling for a modern audience. Filmed on location in Vancouver, the show enlists expert consultants from Japan to work with the Canadian crew in what became a seamless collaboration between Eastern and Western talents in service of telling a truly authentic Japanese story. Committed to being authentic to the era, the sets, the locations, the decor, the props, the construction builds for this show were designed to make the viewer and the cast believe that they stepped into 1600 feudal Japan. Helen describes the sets that were spread over two expansive exterior backlots, a remote mountainside location, and two massive sound stages, which housed all of the interiors of Osagawa's castle, gardens, and Catholic mission, and parts of the imposing ship, the Emerus. This series is a gorgeous design and such an accomplishment, and all the episodes are now available on Hulu. The finale was last night. So I hope you have caught this series. It is compelling and beautiful, and I don't know, I didn't mind reading any of the subtitles because I just thought it was fantastic. So I hope you enjoy.
My husband and my sister-in-law lives next door, and then our tenant from downstairs. The four of us get together and have supper and watch the episodes.
And are you just like this? I'm just like this the whole time, like, oh my gosh.
It's a good story, isn't it? I mean, it's my only fear is that there's so much press. There's an awful lot online, about the show, and of course you see the canon assemblage. You see that episode where they're doing a training field, and people are expecting some whopping great battle, I think.
Well, yeah, I kind of am.
Well, okay, right. Well, I'm not going to. Yeah,
Don't
I mean,
say.
the whole point of Toranaga's strategy is trying to avoid war. So I hope
True.
people don't plummet off a cliff and they go, "What? Where's the big battle?" There aren't. Yes, there is warfare depicted, but we don't get a full on, Henry V Battle of
Right.
Agincourt. So, but anyway, I shouldn't be. These are spoilers.
But
Yeah, no, it's pretty. It's funny because this time last year I was packing my suitcase to go to Italy for 6 weeks, and Shogun was like the furthest thing from my mind. I'd finished it a year earlier,
right.
and now since late February, it's just like every day I wake up and it's Shogun time.
Yeah.
There's something else happening. There's a promotional material and such, and now of course the show airing, which is
Well,
wonderful response.
I will tell you this, you are a Shogun in for Emmys. I'll tell you that much because I can't compare it. I really can't, and I myself hope to be up for one, and I know I can't compare to this. I am blown away with what you have accomplished, and in reading, like, where you filmed it and your stages and your builds and everything like that, I'm just
Yeah,
blown away with what you accomplished, and just
thank you.
bravo. It's just phenomenal, the sets and the
Nice.
the minutes,
Thank you.
the details and everything that you've done, just bravo. I'm just absolutely blown away. So
Well,
congratulations on this. It's
very
beautiful,
much.
beautiful
I
set.
must say, as I've said repeatedly, it was a huge collective of
Beau-
wonderful set decorating and my prop
right.
master, fantastic, and the
Yeah.
cinematography and the costumes are out of this
Oh, the
world.
costumes are dynamite.
I mean,
Dynamite.
what sets this apart, I think, from so many other historical shows that are out there, is that it's we just don't see 17th century Japan.
Yeah.
It's so, I hate to use the word exotic because, of course, that's going to sort of pigeonhole it as I don't know. It's like we try to make it as historically accurate as we could,
No.
and that operates on many levels because there's not really a manual that you can get, on how to do it. There are many, many opinions, and there are a lot of grey areas too. And I just hope that, at the outset, I wasn't hoping to make a documentary.
Right.
We based a lot of the sets on real castles, real images, and uh, I hope we've succeeded. We were making sets, though. We weren't replicating
Right. Because
existing
you're
palaces.
you,
Actually, there was a broader cinematic kind of feel to everything.
your
And
research is of Japanese architecture. It's not specifically of this. There wasn't anything to actually go upon. Right?
yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of well, there's a lot of information about the history of Japanese architecture, and there's a whole. We established very early on there was a style called Shoin Zukuri,
Right.
which was a particular building style that took place.
With
There's a
wood.
certain window
Mhm.
leading up to 1600. And then from 1603, I believe, onwards, we say that we call that the Edo period.
Mhm.
I think things remain quite stable in Japan thereafter. The Edo period expanded right into the 19th century. And of course, when we go online, because that was my main resource for research, that plus we had an amazing historical advisor, Frederick Krins, in Kyoto. And he's a Belgian gentleman who's lived in Japan for 30 odd years and is
Oh.
steeped in the history of this period, the Sengoku period, which is quite specific window. And he was immensely helpful throughout the show. We had lots of dialogue at the outset. What I did was I took all of my designs as they were developed. I'd post them on a site called Bluescape, which was like a digital pinboard, and then invite all the relevant people to that. So 24/7, you could look anything up. You could look up any of the visuals, any of the set designs as they progressed.
Hmm.
And that was a really good resource. It's there's a and there are a lot of historical palaces, buildings dotted all over Japan, and I think that's where you fall into a little bit of a trap. You keep looking at variations and you try to establish, okay, what's going to work best for us? What is going to support the show best
Hmm.
for us? So yeah, we may not have got it 100% right, but I think we've
Uh,
got it, a large part of it visually is right, I think.
I
And
I think you did a tremendous job. I was wondering if they sent you to Japan to I was hoping they sent you.
I wish I quite honestly, from a standing start, from a cold standing start in mid-January of 2021,
Wow.
right through till the end of filming, June the 30th, 2022. So that's how many months is that? 16
18
months or
months.
so. I
Yeah.
would love to have got to Japan. I think it would have been quite edifying,
Well, of
to have
course.
gone, to have toured, to have actually really, really, until you're actually physically witnessing it, it's a little bit removed when you're relying completely on the internet.
Of course.
And
Of course.
it would have been quite inspiring. I think it would have been inspirational
Of
to have done
course.
that. Having said that, I feel that I got completely immersed in the process, sitting here in this room with my computer
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
discussing things with Frederick and various other advisors. We had a gentleman on set who was an advisor, and he hadn't had a translator, and his opinions sometimes didn't quite exactly match up with other advisors. So we quite often we sort of as a
Interesting.
group we'd evaluate whether or not we could go ahead with some detail or whether or not it was just really not going to be correct. So there's a lot of
Oh, that's interesting.
discussion over every detail.
Well, I think too because there's so much reverence in their designs and there's so much
Oh,
in their
it's
tradition and everything that you there's an in passion in on what we do to get it right and everything. So I would think if there's discrepancy, it's
there
kind
are
of like,
some.
oh God, I want to get this right. What is it?
Oh, I know. We had to backtrack on some of the set dressing, and because again, when you look at photographs, obviously the photographs only go as far back as mid 19th century, and you're
Right,
looking at Edo period.
right.
So it's very hard to rely on photos. You really are relying on paintings, woodcuts, scrolls. There are these amazing scrolls done through those earlier centuries where you see domestic life, sometimes depicted as a lot of artists' depictions that they may not be to scale properly. So sometimes you're kind of really looking closely at some little detail. You go, is that really the right size? Is that
Yeah.
okay? And and that was a very interesting process to try to be very careful about looking at photographs because they could be misleading. They could send you off, and I'm sure I've deviated. I'm sure that I've pulled in a few details that would be slightly later in period. Again, you get to a point where it's is it working cinematically too? Like, is
Oh
that
yeah.
really should we focus as forensically, on every detail? Yes, the show is being marketed as immensely as accurate as it can be,
Yeah.
and I just hope that I hope that that's the response that we get, that we have done a good job.
Well,
Um,
I think
yeah,
too with your with the sets is also the palette that you have. You have to work so closely with costumes too because there's not a lot of dressing in these
well,
sets. There's not a
you're
lot going
a set
on.
decorator. I mean,
Yes.
it's extraordinary because again, my impulse, is to
Yeah.
dress the background, dress the foreground, and more often than not, we were simply removing dressing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard.
Less, 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 less.
Yeah.
And so the walls, the floors, the ceilings, all of those architectural details become the set. And true to historically, and I think perhaps to some degree today, there's a whole sort of aesthetic in removing objects. When you've finished writing at your little desk, you don't just leave it lying around.
Right.
It goes away into storage. So, and this just took a few beats for us to really get our heads around because, of course, the decorators had gone. We were all working really rapidly to pull everything together, and the decorators had buyers in Japan and had shipments of all sorts of domestic objects that showed up. They went forging ahead with a huge workshop full of people making domestic paraphernalia, baskets, all manner of things for the different sets. And some of those objects we didn't use. Some of those objects you go, right, okay, that's gorgeous, lacquerware, but is it correct? It's not quite
Right.
correct. The
Right.
shape is not. So there was a lot of discussion, a lot of vetting of everything. And again, the palette working with Carlos, I think we established quite early on. I thought when I first met Carlos, right, okay, I will have to give him an idea of what every set's going to look like, the color palette. And I started that process, and then the more I looked at his costumes, because I every day my office was right next to the wardrobe department,
Mm.
and 10 times a day I went through there down to the stages. And so I saw everything on the mannequins, I saw everything on the walls. And in a way, you sort of couldn't quite go wrong with the color palette because his colors, his costumes were so spectacular in their color and finish. And my sets ended up, well, I like to think they're kind of neutral
Yes. So that
and they
they
foil
yeah.
for the costumes, and so much of it is shot, with a lot of people talking and a lot of people in silhouette and so on. So I'd like to think that our palette for the sets actually just hopefully helps support the costumes because they become the primary interest in every frame, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I I also too with the decorating and the design have to commend your two decorators, Lisa and Jonathan Lancaster. I just think they did a brilliant job.
They did a great job. They did
Just
a really good job.
brilliant
And
job. And you
yeah,
also had four DPs, right? You had four different
yeah, we
DPs,
did. Yes, we did. We had our initial DP did the first two episodes, and then everything was sort of clustered a bit.
and then did you
So,
block shoot it then? Did you do two? No, did you
no,
do two episodes?
there was only one scenario where because of a location's availability,
Mm,
that was our fishing village, the lower Ajiro. That site wasn't available to us all year. So we did have to sort of jump fast forward and do some of the beach scenes in episode 4 or 5
mm.
very early on in order to get them shot. But those are the only instances where we sort of leapt out of sync.
Oh
And
wow.
otherwise we shot every episode start to finish.
Fin-
And that was surprising to me because I hadn't really worked on a series before. And so the idea of having a number of different directors was new to me. I've worked on many shows where we basically have one. Sometimes there's occasionally more so nowadays. You might find there might be two directors,
Yeah.
but it's much more of a linear approach. You start building. If you've got a schedule to keep to, you build large sets. They as you roll through the schedule, you build the sets. What I found with this show was that we was very front end heavy. We had to have
Yeah.
virtually all of our major sets ready for day one because they all featured in the
In the first
pretty
episode of this.
much
Yeah.
two episodes. Like,
Yeah.
oh my god! And thereafter, the episodic sets were smaller, and but still took a fair amount of planning ahead. and also just talking with directors before they even showed up here in Vancouver, just to familiarize them with the sets as they were.
Right.
And then when the directors would each director would arrive and each DP, I'd go through a day driving around all the different sets with them and talking and telling them why we'd done certain things, and if they needed any more modifications, we would take note of that, and build whatever new sets were relevant to their episodes. So a very interesting process, quite different from making a feature film.
So you had you had because to me it looks like everything's outside, but you had stages, right?
Yes,
You had
yes,
like the main room where they have the meetings, which I know
yeah,
I know I will I don't know the
yes.
names of these rooms and I know I will butcher the names anyway. But the main meeting room, that's interior. So a lot of the interior rooms, they're on the set, right?
Yeah, all
Yeah,
of the palace, the Osaka Palace.
that's
So it was a ceremonial meeting hall, is what we called it,
mhm.
or CMH.
Beautiful.
Or
Beautiful.
CMH. Everything had an acronym. And just alongside that was an assembly room where we often see the council meeting, stamping documents and discussing their strategy and so on. So that was a very long, narrow room all the rooms were subdividable.
Can I
That's the thing we had.
I'm gonna
To,
share
to
this. I just wanna see,
oh, right.
is it
Yeah,
that room?
that's the ceremonial meeting hall.
That's the ceremony. That room is phenomenal.
Okay,
That
let
is
me tell you. I'll tell you a little story about this because this was one of the very earliest sets that I turned my hand to because at the outset it was just post COVID lockdown,
mm,
and so I could hire people, but they couldn't come into the office. So I started off with a couple of set designers, and I thought, well, this is our biggest interior, so let's get cracking on this. What I did was I went to the site of the Nijojo Castle, which was flagged as our sort of primary relevant reference for this particular room. These tiger paintings are very typical,
mhm.
and the only thing that's incorrect about what you're looking at right now is there should have been a flat ceiling. At the very beginning of the
Mm.
show, I looked at the architecture. I thought, well, okay, relatively low, flat ceiling is going to, certain it'll prohibit the light. It will be uh, perhaps not as interesting as if you more interesting if you took the ceiling away. So
Right.
would everybody accept? So what you're looking at is actually incorrect.
But you
I
gave
will
it that
admit
great shadow there and that great shaft of light is what you've given it.
that's the purpose. That was the purpose because very early on, talking with Frederick, it was super clear that the primary source of lighting to light the sets was actually the gardens outside. And so typically the paper shoji screens would be opened,
Mhm.
either they could be removed or they could just be slid apart. But you allowed daylight to flood in.
Mhm.
I felt that this gave us having no ceiling, could we buy that architecturally? Would everybody accept that? I mean, and it was a bit of a round table on that. And we decided that we could go ahead with it because it created a lot more interesting lighting
Oh,
conditions
yeah. And just
with
that scene there with him, the way he is sitting and the light is behind him, it's just gorgeous. And it's gold and it's and his costume and everything, it's just gorgeous. They're like
yeah.
paintings. It's like you've created gorgeous paintings.
Yeah. Well, I had the help of an incredible illustrator, a girl that I've worked with for a number of years now, Kirsten Franson.
Mm.
And she dived right into this period and to all the research, all the brush strokes, etc. What we would do is we'd develop a bit of a theme for each room,
Mm.
and she painted these digitally. So we learned very early on that the best way to approach it was to have her spend 2 or 3 weeks at least on each room, and she would
Oh,
paint in like high resolution uh, digitally, and
those
then
panels. Those
we would gild the panel, like
oh
the actual
wow.
panels, and then we would send them off to a printing house, and they would do a pass of white ink,
Mhm.
and then other colors on top of that. So the white bellies of the tigers are printed as a separate layer. And we ended up printing, and it made perfect sense to us. I mean, we
Oh,
have some
gorgeous.
wonderful um, scenic painters who can generally move fairly swiftly, but some of these rooms took, a decade or more to paint.
Right.
And
You got a
so it
week.
was
You got a week. Maybe
exactly,
day.
absolutely, yeah.
Shoots Friday.
And we used everything, all the, a lot of the hardware was printed, 3D printed. I was asked on some other interview site, did we use traditional Japanese tools? No.
Well,
We
no.
used guns, we used whatever was available to us,
Oh,
and
boy.
likewise with the printing techniques
Mhm.
and the and 3D printing. When the camera sort of lovingly moves over the ridge line of a building and you see that wonderful adornment at the end of the
Right.
ridge, that was actually milled out of foam. And
Oh, yeah, all the tiles. You had like 10,000 tiles you made, right?
the tiles were bonkers. I mean, we got, yeah, we
Oh
had
my
a
god.
whole team of people for weeks. We got those cut mechanically, the tiles, and then
Mhm.
we had a whole process of dipping them in washes. And so the whole of the stage at one point was awash with 10,000 tiles. And because they were on everything. There were two different styles. We decided to have the type that stack, and then what we call the wave tile, where they sort of hook sideways.
Mhm.
So we did a couple of sets with that style of tile, and varied the color a little bit throughout. And yeah, it was quite amazing process. Just tearing it off in chunks. How many shoji screens did we do? Like hundreds, hundreds and hundreds,
Oh my god.
and miles of rice paper. Very early on, we kind of learned that we laminated the rice paper with a matte vinyl, which didn't affect the way the light shone through it, and it made them much more durable. I mean, in truth, shoji are just covered with rice paper, and then I think you spritz them with water, and it tightens like a drum skin.
Hmm.
So again, we took shortcuts all the way through, as we had to. Again, kind of racing against the clock initially, because one of the things that we were up against was that the stage space was delayed because the show prior to ours had gone on hold during COVID and geared up months later. So we had a sort of 6 week shortfall of stage space. So again, there's only so much you can kind of pre-build until you really have to have the stage to build. So yeah,
Well, you had
a
a
lot of,
lot of outdoor I mean, the boats alone. I mean, the
yes,
boats that you built, I'm assuming the interior of the boats was on the stage, but the exterior of those boats and then that whole
yeah,
village outside you had to build,
yes.
right? I mean, it just goes on and on. Your builds are unbelievable.
Had a great crew, had a great construction manager, great paint department,
So
great greens department, and
oh, the
everybody was
greens
really,
were meticulous. I mean, Japanese gardens and everything that you have there, they're gorgeous. That poor
again,
guy died on the rock. It was a sin.
I know the one rock that was too slippery.
I
And
know. That one rock, that poor
yeah.
guy. Well, he was a
Well, I
mess.
know. Yeah,
But
so we built the little ponds in some of the gardens. I mean, getting back to this, what was on stage and
oh
what was
yeah,
on
yeah.
location.
Sorry.
Uh, the palace interiors were all on stage, and the gardens that you see beyond the engawas or verandas, those are all built on stage. Um, we built garden walls around everything because we had to shoot into something, and in some places we had some large gate houses and such. And after that, we did a big painted backdrop, which was just very lightly sprayed into a fairly neutral cloud formation. I mean, you couldn't get too specific because right at the start, Michael Cleart, our visual effects supervisor, we didn't want to put a blue screen out there. We thought, okay, well, we'll put something neutral, and then Michael can help that along and paint it up when needed. And most of what you see beyond the garden walls was actual scenery. We had an extra pocket of money at a certain point when it was deemed that we weren't going to do as many visual effects shots in the gardens, that we could actually then build some structures. So there's some massive big roof
Oh,
structures
yeah.
that you don't see the lower part. They're on frames and wheels because we move them around to get them in and out. And also a lot of trees. We had to blow wind in the trees, so there was a little bit of movement just to help bring those stage gardens to life, because otherwise they can look incredibly flat.
Oh, yeah.
And
They're
and
beautiful.
kudos to the DPs also. It's not the easiest thing having a complete outdoor garden, that marries with the exterior of an actual set as well, and make it feel like realistic daytime.
Yeah, because I've done shows and it seems like the sun is in the middle of the room and
Yeah,
sometimes it doesn't work.
yeah. Yes,
The
you've heard
sun
from
is
myself.
here. So
Okay.
yeah, very definite kudos to them. Because you had a
Yeah.
lot of elements too. You had rain, you had snow,
Yes.
you had a lot of
And
all of the seasons are also in this.
yeah.
So it's
Well, when we were out at location, so our samurai village, the large thatched buildings that you see, there's a whole cluster of them built into what was effectively it was a car park. It was a little saddle in between two small rises. And so I thought, well, this is a good little spot to build the village, and then we can have some houses kind of going uphill a little bit to create a little sort of nestling village. And those are my favorite sets. Those are the sets where you see snow, you see all the trees are bare of their leaves, because we did shoot right the way through the seasons
Mm,
and we embraced them. And some days it was really cold.
I'm sure it was.
And,
Because you're in
what,
Vancouver, right? I mean, I'm sure it was really
well,
cold.
as you can see, the rain factor. I mean, when it wasn't raining, we had to make rain. That's the crazy thing. But it creates a whole visual texture, the rain. I love it. Personally, I love it. I have to say that because it was unavoidable. And it sets the tone. There's a slightly gloomy tone to some of the sets. And
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know, it seems very appropriate for the show. It's very moody, very atmospheric.
There is let me see if I can share this one. I have this FX puts out this gorgeous deck of your
See, you've got a package there, right? Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so what you're looking at there is one of our streets in Osaka. So that was one of our locations that was on the waterfront in Vancouver. And that was we did about 4 city blocks with a sort of central area that became Edo later on in episode 8. And we built the portion of the town alongside, adjacent to the castle walls.
hmm.
So the castle wall system was practical, and it was over 300 feet long.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
and part of that, the reasoning behind that scale was that we had to, for one of the episodes, there's a huge conflict as party of our characters are trying to leave, and they're being held up. They're being stopped at every gate. So the set got longer and longer and longer. And we were but it gets used quite a lot, used day and night. So there was a fair amount of night shooting actually down on this particular set.
I missed you.
And we were right on the water. And it used to be an old cedar mill, the property.
Oh
And
wow.
when we first scouted it in January of 2021, it had these massive, great chunks of equipment, conveyor belts, all sorts of metal guide tracks, and completely chock a block with heavy machinery. And the owners of the property uh, really removed it all for us, and we graded the property, and we put in, we leveled things
Oh
out
wow.
where there were huge dips and so on. And meantime, we were prefabricating as much as we could, and then started to actually put the streets together.
What are
And
your what are your streets? Is that gravel?
it's gravel. Well, okay, there was another large choice. What do you do in imagining that this set and all of our exterior sets virtually have to survive all year round?
Right.
Would they just like to do packed earth, like to have done just
Yeah.
packed earth, it would be in a sort of a complete mud bath
Right.
most of the time. So what we did was we did a mixture of gravel with earth, and this was put together for by one of our suppliers. And I
Smart.
loved it when it first got laid. It was quite brown in texture. It was really nice sort of warm tone that went with all the woodwork. And as the rain hit it, of course, all the soil component sank down lower and lower. So we'd rake it to try to kind of bring it back up again.
Mm.
It's actually all gravel with soil mixed into it. And that was a choice for us to find the surface that was going to work best for us throughout the sets.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's nice, it has kind of like a shimmer to it, I'm sure the
yeah,
DPs liked it because it's not like they only had minimal lighting, so I'm sure they got, reflection off of it. I'm sure that they
it
appreciated that.
glistens. It glistens, and of course, once you get it nice and wet, it really glistens. And
Yeah.
it was more often than not, we were wetting it down,
Yeah.
even on days when there was no rain.
Right.
Uh, just sort of it kept the dust down. That was another factor
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Once it dried out, it would go quite a pale color and get very dusty. So it did make sense. Special effects guys every day would do wet downs on the set, which
Yeah.
it sort of it enriched the color of the gravel and the soil, so it gave it a better tone.
Do you know
And
do you know what how much, like, not square footage, but, like, I don't know, would you have, like, 3 or 4 football fields of, like, sets outdoors? Like, how big was this it just seems endless to me
yeah,
because, I mean, I
I
look at
guess,
all of this and,
yeah,
it just keeps going and going, and, I mean, all of
yeah,
this is just so gorgeous to me. It's like
yeah. There was a lot of scenery.
yeah.
A
Oh,
real lot of scenery,
so
and
beautiful.
um, it was great. We got very conversant with materials. One of the things that we did on virtually all of these sets is that we burnt the wood.
Mm,
So we buy well, this is another story too. Also, the availability of materials was restrictive because of COVID, because this all
yeah.
happened right
Had all
after.
that to go
Like,
through too.
well, supply chain had broken down for a lot of materials. And so every morning, virtually 10 to 7 or thereabouts, I'd be sitting in the construction manager's office with the construction manager and a couple of his foremen and the construction buyer. And we'd be debating materials, like what can we get our hands on? Okay, today, there's a couple of lifts of eucalyptus plywood out there. Okay, well, I'd say, all right, well, why don't we, can we get a sheet
Like
and then we'll
this,
get
right?
we'll get the painters to stain it and we'll see if that's going to work because I'd never seen eucalyptus plywood. Fine. So this process went on and on every day, and it was like watching the stock market. What was available in terms of sheet goods and board lumber today? We have a special on this and not on that. And so, yeah, it was challenging from that point of view. And I think very early on, the costs also ramped up more than we expected initially because prices just
Yeah.
fluctuated wildly with all of the lumber that we used and all the materials. And so that was another interesting little facet to the whole process.
Yeah,
But yeah, there
you know
was
it's gonna be expensive and you have to do it right, but when you
yeah,
pile on that extra COVID asterisk, that
it gets the
really that really
yeah,
hits it, I'm sure.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah.
And supply chain and getting it in time. I'm sure getting it in time was also a huge factor for you. I
It
mean,
was. It
yeah,
was. It was kind of a fun process too, because it you stretch yourself a bit and you really look closely at back again at materials and what can you use instead of the thing that you normally use.
right.
So that was kind of an interesting process. The ships, yeah, I'm looking now at some of your photos
Oh,
on the
the
screen because
ships.
we
Yeah.
built a lot of the smaller vessels. We those were all built by our props and set decorator
Mm,
set decorate department. There were a couple of boats that were actually I think they were existing boats that were then clad with wood. So we realized early on that we could use a fleet of smaller boats,
mm.
and we had had the help of a gentleman from New England, Mr. Brooks, who was an expert on Japanese boat building. So he was incredibly helpful
Uh,
in that process. And then a couple of our European boats, we actually, after when COVID hit, I, along with most of my crew, were working on another Disney project called Peter Pan and Wendy. And we had started to build sets. We'd started to build a cabin, captain's
that
interior.
doesn't have a
Uh,
boat at all. No.
yeah, but what happened was, of course, everything got shut down. This is early 2020.
Mm.
So we were we were building parts of ships at that point, and everything shut down for months. And when that show, I then rolled over and started working on another show, a Netflix project that summer. And then when Peter Pan came back again, I was too committed to the other shows. So I stepped off Peter Pan, and my crew kind of went back to Peter Pan. So anyway, we at the end of Peter Pan, we had access to various ship parts, and we modified, put things together. We European ships, that is. Of course, we built the galley, the Japanese galley from scratch, and we used up parts of sets from Peter Pan, which was very helpful.
Oh, that's great.
And again, everything went through a sort of modification process. Nothing was exactly right, and that was very helpful for some of our below decks, like our below deck set at
Yeah.
the outset, where you first meet all of the
Oh,
Dutch
yeah.
sailors. That was a below deck set.
I love that
Um,
set. That was
and
fantastic.
we just filled it with that we could cram with lots of dressing. There's supposed to be a lot of goods, a lot of booty that they'd stolen, and of
Mhm.
course the cannons, which play later on
Yeah.
in the training field episode. So yeah.
Yeah. I I think too, just the vastness that you have going on of in each set, and the Portuguese versus the in and then
Yep.
Japan, and learning too and researching all of this must have been fascinating, and just the
It
different
was
architecture.
endless. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody involved, the set deck buyers, prop master, everybody, whatever project they were working on, they did their own research.
Mm.
Everybody brought stuff to the table and brought ideas to the table, and then everything went through a sort of vetting process. So it never stopped. It never
Yeah.
stopped from day one. And again, we're not historians. We are doing
Nope.
our very best level of research, and we're also bending the truth, bending some of the guidelines a little bit to make things a bit more cinematic. Um, yeah, it was quite a consuming job, the research component.
Did you find the prep to be too short or too long? Like, did you feel, I mean, I think we all want longer prep. I mean, that's
Oh yeah.
always it's kind of a dumb question. But but did you find
It
like, oh,
was
this feels like we've got
it
enough
was
here.
yeah, it was just enough.
Yeah.
I think if we could replay it all over again, of course, I'd love to have had an extra year.
Well, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And you really, I mean, yeah, there was a set amount of pressure to push sets out, push things forward to meet our schedule. And but I think we had enough time. We had enough time, and I had a wonderful crew in the art department. We had really skilled art directors and set designers who very much got into the whole period, all the research work. It was rewarding. It was rewarding, and also my experience as a supervising art director. That's primarily what I've done over the last 20 years. I think that enabled me to plot it out. The big picture. I was good. I think I'm fairly well versed at big picture planning, so that helps a lot. I think if I'd been in any way nervous or triple guessing myself, it would have slowed us down. I felt like we couldn't slow down too much because there was such a volume to do.
Yeah. I mean, you've done some, just little movies, Helen. You've only done some little movies in art directing, like Justice League and, Monuments Men, Perry Jackson. I mean, Man of Steel, just these little Mission Impossible movies. So I don't know how you handled this. I mean, it's just, although I did want to ask you because I saw that you started too in model making, which I got into for like a minute way back when. I love model making. I always
Yeah.
feel like, God, I would have loved to have been a model maker if that ever came up again. Like,
I went to theatre school initially, and of course, in theatre school, it's in the
yeah.
design of things. It's all about making. It used to be. I'm not sure how it is now, with everything being so ultra digital. I still believe in physical models. I do
Yes.
believe that they provide important focus for people. It's all great to have stuff on the screen, revolving. You can walk through sets. Fantastic, that's great, but there's nothing like having an actual physical tabletop model of a set. I
Yes.
still believe in that. And it's imperative for meetings, especially when you're gathered around discussing some complicated piece of blocking. Having a physical manifestation of the set is immensely important. And that's how I started. I rolled over into film, actually as upholstering, oddly enough. I worked in theatre, and I got to know a few people in the set decorating department in Vancouver, and I went to a wedding. I met a decorator there, and she said, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "Okay, well, I work in theatre, and I've been upholstering a lot lately." And she said, "Oh my goodness, you upholster? Could you?" So she hired me, and uh, off I went, and I joined the set decorating department. This is in 1986, and I thought, right, after a few years, I thought, what am I doing in the set decorating department? I wanted to design sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went through a process with IATSE, our local here in town, where they used to have a whole take-home project that you had to do. And
Oh, like
I
a test. Yeah.
spent 2 weeks.
Oh,
They
wow.
give you a subject matter, and I spent 2 whole weeks doing
Oh,
storyboards,
that's great.
drafting, sketching, all of this, and then bringing that forward. They don't do this anymore,
No.
apparently, but in those days, it was the way in which you could enter a department, and then you would sit for a 3-hour exam where you had to draw like a mad thing. And
I think they still should. I think I thought there was a recently there up until recently, I think there still was a test in New York up until like probably 10,
so,
15 years ago. There was, but now not anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Now it's probably unconstitutional.
Yeah. Yeah, we're probably offending someone if we ask them to take a test.
Um, anyway, it was interesting. I mean, then I got into the art department, and then you started, and again back to model making. There was a category. It wasn't actually a union category, but it was a recognized one. It was sort of model maker slash illustrator.
Mm,
So I did that on a few shows and loved it. Never quite went back to theatre. I
mm.
tried to keep the two going, and then it just became a complete time crunch. I could never give as much time as you need to do theatre properly. So I sort of segued out of that around 2000, and I haven't done anything since. Much as I love theatre, I really do, and I love all things theatrical, and
Yeah.
so that's a particular bias for me. I love sort of fantastical theatrical things, which in a way Shogun
Shogun.
was. It was a piece of very complex theatre.
I
Um,
would have to say this is pretty close. I mean, just in the
yeah,
round that the sets are and the round and everything that you've created there, that's very theatrical.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And I think also the part of the back to the appeal of the show, I think it is because it is so utterly different than anything else that's out there right now.
Yeah.
And the Japanese actors are breathtaking in their subtlety.
Oh,
And I do hope that everybody can keep up with the subtitles. I
I know.
watch lots of foreign films, so I'm completely. But I have three brothers in England, and I Zoom with them virtually every week, and they're all watching it intently, and they go, "Oh God!" My oldest brother goes, "I have to freeze frame, I have to read the
Yeah.
read the subtitles." And one of my sister-in-laws said, "Well, couldn't they have spoken English?" You go, No, of course they couldn't, and that would
I
be ridiculous.
I I know I'm not gonna say this right, but I know I had read or saw that the script was written in English, but then transferred to Japanese, but then
I,
or something like
yes,
that. Like it was
I think it's
transferred
a back
back
and
and
forth
forth.
process.
Yeah, so that it was correct in both languages and by the actors somehow.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a process. It was a
Yeah.
process that happened like a year before I ever came onto the show. There
No.
was a lot of writing went on, a lot of back and forth, and then it also, again, once the show was put together, the subtitles are quite specific. They mirror what exactly is being said,
Mm,
not what the script says.
not
So
what the script says.
again, that was it was a lot of care, massive amount of care went into that process.
Mm,
And I think all of these levels of that we were operating on really come together to make a really interesting whole. And I think I'm amazed at the response to the show. As I say, I sort of, once you've finished, you put it aside and get on with other things.
yeah.
As of mid-February, when we went down to Los Angeles to the premiere, it came back in massive waves.
Yeah.
The
There's a lot of billboards around LA too. If I don't know if
I
you drove
know,
around a lot, but there's a lot of billboards around LA for it too.
all over London too. I've got friends in family in London who go, look, this is a such and such station. There's a moving billboard with it
Yeah.
on, with the trailer playing.
Yeah.
The effects have done an amazing job
Yeah.
promoting it. I will say that it's staggering what's the
Well, yeah,
level.
you got a 78 page promo here they sent out. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous and it should be. I mean, it's very intricate and you could tell that they put a lot into it in all of the creatives. I think
Yes,
that's what's really nice too about I would say FX on a whole. I think they
yes.
care a lot about the
Oh,
creatives and the makeup and the hair and the costumes and design and everything. That's why the one or two projects I've done with FX, I really like working with them, I must say, because I just do.
yeah.
I'm just gonna say I do.
I knew of effects before, but I'd worked on Disney shows before, but FX was relatively new to me, and I think they've really got behind this show in a huge way.
Wait a
And
minute, is this FX for Hulu? Is this on Hulu?
it's I watch it on Disney Plus.
Right. So this is
So
FX produced for
FX.
Hulu.
Well, I think they're both subsidiaries of
Oh, right.
Disney.
Oh, yeah, they're
Both
both
have it
Disney because it's
right.
Disney and then it's, yeah. Yeah, that's all the
Yes,
same. Never mind.
but one of the things I've noticed is with so much interest in the show, of course, when you go online, there's a massive wave of people commenting on every aspect of the show. And I know
Yeah.
there's more to come. People analyze. That's the world that we live in. Everything, every step of the way, everything is analyzed on social media and so on. And I have to, at a certain point, I can't really tune into that. Because it's done. It's a fait
Yeah.
accompli. I love to go back and correct a few things, but it is what it is. And I think I think as a whole, I have to keep thinking of the project as a whole, as a cinematic piece.
Oh, yeah.
Um, what we've done, every department supports the action, supports the story,
Yeah.
and I think it's truly the test of the project.
I have said even recently someone was asking me about like the filming process and everything and I said, I even in watching other people's work when you say like, "Oh, that was an odd choice." And I think to myself, well, you never know if the DP moved that or the onset wasn't there that or blinked or oh they probably turned the other way and had to move
Yeah,
something for this or that location fell through and they had to dress it this way like there's so many factors that go into a
yeah,
set
you're
in a
absolutely right. You're
minute
absolutely right.
and it doesn't matter if you had 7 months to prep it
There's
and
that one thing that's not in the right place at the
yeah,
right time.
it
It's kind of it.
happens. It happens.
Yeah.
So I
There's a few of those, and I'm not even going to say what they are, but there's a few that when I see them on screen, I'm like, oh,
uh
okay,
now I know.
skip that part.
I used to like give myself like lashes watching my own work.
Oh,
Like, oh no.
because we take it so seriously.
Yeah,
You're
we
absolutely right.
care.
There's it's like the moment the camera rolls,
But it's only you, but it's only
counts.
really us that knows, really. I mean, yes, you get those super fans. I've gotten you get
Yeah,
letters, like you get, or emails or whatever, and you're like, dude, come on.
yeah. You know, there are waves of that coming this way on the show. Is that door handle correct? Is this? I mean, some of the issues too are people might be correct in commenting. You know, that certain things might be
Yeah, but
perhaps from a slightly later period. You go, okay, is that again? There's no physical manual on this. We
yeah,
strive to get everything as
yes,
correct as possible.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that.
some things slip through the cracks here and there, and some things we actually made a conscious choice to slip, to actually modify.
Well, I commend every effort you made on this. I just think it's truly fantastic, and I just think it's phenomenal. I can't wait to see the next two episodes. I was just in awe of the work, and I just hope that it's acknowledged when it comes time for award season, which I'm sure it will be, because
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
everywhere.
well, it feels that way. It just feels as
Yeah,
a complete package. It
yeah,
feels like it's got a lot going for it. It
yeah,
really does. It
yeah,
really it stand out. It stands out
yeah.
from the norm, and I'm
It's
looking forward
beautiful.
to seeing if that sustains itself all year. You know, because there's virtually a whole year ahead.
Well,
Many other
yeah, I
shows
mean,
not coming to
voting. No,
August.
no, Emmy voting opens next month. You'll be fine.
Oh, well, I hope
You'll be
for the
fine.
best.
Submissions are open till May 9th, so you got to get
I
your
did,
submission in
yeah,
by May 9th.
I did fill out some paperwork.
Okay,
I'm
good.
going to confess. I was sent some paperwork, and you know, again, not having worked on a television series before, there's all of that world. You know, that I don't. I mean, I don't normally work on Oscar nominated films.
Well,
Sadly, I wish I had a
well,
few more
this
of
is
those.
like doing 10 movies. It's like you did 10 little movies here.
I don't know how you would compress this novel into a 2.5 hour film.
Yeah.
It seems having done 10 hours on it,
Yeah.
you know, and even then, some of the story gets pushed through really quickly in places. I mean, I am not, you know, a scholar of the book. I will say that, but some people are, and some people are already going, well, you know, such and such is not correct, and they glossed over that. And again, you know, how do you tell a story in less than 10 hours? I don't want to go back now to
Right.
doing that. This is the way forward.
Oh, you know what I wanted to ask? Did you watch any of the movies by Kurosawa? Is it Kurosawa?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I did as a teenager in my 20s. I
Yeah.
was mad keen about film, and I watched many Kurosawas. And I think initially, when I first started, I thought, right, I better over Christmas of 2020, I sat myself up in downstairs in my big screen. I thought, right, I'm gonna watch Last Samurai. I'm gonna watch about four Kurosawas, anything I lay my hands on. And talking with Justin at the beginning, I think he didn't say don't watch them. He said that's not quite what we're doing.
Right.
It's helpful, of course, you know, to look at those films. So I stopped, and I thought, right, okay, I'm just going to plunge into this story and this novel, and that's what we're making. You know, we're
Yeah.
not any anything, any film reference is definitely worth watching. And I
Yeah.
did watch a few Japanese films as well that weren't just looking at the scenery, looking at the
Yeah.
fishing beach, for example. We modeled that on the sets from a smaller Japanese production because our advisor felt that those little fishing huts, the houses were really spot on. So that became a good reference for us.
Yeah,
You know, and we
the only thing I had recently watched Ran, which was one of the ones he did in the 80s,
yeah.
and just the flags, there were so many flags in that movie. Like I
Yeah.
there's so many flags in that movie. It's not as flag heavy in your in
Oh, I know. And
Shogun.
again,
Like,
it's like incredibly dramatic as
yeah.
well. You know,
Yeah.
really dramatic. And it's like that wasn't actually what
Yeah.
we were doing. We were doing elements of that drama, but not as a whole.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I just found that funny. I was like, oh, not more flag. I hope they don't get into flags like Rand did.
I think we've got enough flags. I think
Yeah.
we have enough fabric flapping around.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Well, Helen, thank you so much. I truly enjoyed the work, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And I hope to see you. If you
So thank you again to Helen for that interview and just sitting down and letting me dork out of of just wondering, how did you get it all done? And how did you do it? And then, talking through COVID and all of those ripples, and just a really fantastic design and wonderful crew that she had. So bravo to them. And yeah, like I said, I don't think anyone else needs to submit, but you have to submit if you want to win. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you again to Helen. So fantastic. Let's see. Next, as I said, next week I have graphic designer Gina Alessi from the Apple show Manhunt. And we talk about her graphic designs, period graphic designs throughout the show. And also, she developed a graphic design course on her website. So we will get into that also. I talked enough. All right. I hope you got an earful. I'm Kim Wanup for Decorating Pages.